from the Matrix?
Yes. No. I mean, I was.
Why did you leave?
Involved in the rape of Persephone. As I mentioned, Hades, the king of the dead, had a queen. Her name was Persephone, and she was the
After all the rituals were accomplished, Kamsa, who loved his sister dearly, offered to drive the chariot to escort his sister to her in-laws' home.
She was the daughter of Zeus and Demeter, the goddess of agriculture. Hades fell in love with Persephone the first time he saw her, but he knew Demeter would never let her daughter go for a guy like him. So instead, he hit up Zeus and asked him if he could make her his wife, and Zeus said, fine, as long as you keep it low-key. And yes, that's an exact quote. One day, when Persephone was picking flowers in the fields of Nyssa with the goddesses Artemis and Athena, Hades suddenly burst through a crack in the earth, grabbed hold of her, and dragged her back down to the underworld. In some versions, he was riding on his chariot, and in others he wasn't. That detail isn't really important, but I mention it because his chariot was featured in the movie too.
I had to.
I had to leave my home too.
Sati. I am sorry, she is still very curious.
I know you.
Yes, in the restaurant of the Frenchman. I am Ramakandra.
Too. Now, like most gods and goddesses, Demeter was very protective of her daughter, and right after Persephone disappeared, she began to wander the earth in search for her. Since she was the goddess of the harvest, Demeter forbade the earth from producing any food until Persephone returned, or in some versions, she's so distraught that she neglects her godly responsibilities. Either way, it wasn't long before humans began to die from lack.
When they were on their way, suddenly there was a great voice from the skies.
Oh, cruel Kamsa, why are you so happy? Beware, the very sister you love so much is going to give birth to a son who will destroy you. The eighth son born to Devaki.
This is my wife Kamala, my daughter Sati. We are most honored to meet you.
Your programs.
Oh, yes. I am the power plant systems manager for recycling operations. My wife is an interactive software programmer. She is highly creative.
What are you doing here? You do not belong here.
Kamala, goodness, I apologize. My wife can be very direct.
It's okay. I don't have an answer. I don't even know where here is.
This place is nowhere. It is between your world and our world.
Who's the train man?
He works for the Frenchman.
Die from lack of food and cry out to the gods for help. Between the suffering on earth and the other gods complaining to Zeus about the sudden lack of sacrifices coming their way, he was feeling the pressure and had no choice but to send Hermes down to Hades and ask him to return Persephone. While he wasn't happy about it, the rich one ultimately agreed to let his new bride go, but just before she boarded his chariot, he forced her to eat a pomegranate seed, then sent her off. When the girl was finally reunited with her mother, Demeter knew instantly something was wrong. As it turns out, because Persephone tasted food in the underworld, she had to stay in the underworld. However, because Demeter really wasn't having any of that, they compromised that Persephone would get to live on Earth for 2/3 of the year. Some versions say 2/3 at least, some say 3/4, and others even say half. It doesn't really matter. What's important is that every time Persephone reunited with her mother, the world's plants and crops would flourish, but whenever she went down to Hades' domain is when winter would fall on the Earth. In that, Solo fam, is the messed up origins of the seasons.
Unnatural and unkind.
Killed her, for whom my tears have made me blind. I am as woeful as Virginius was, and have 1,000 times more cause than he to do this outrage, and it now is done.
What was she ravished? Tell who did the deed.
Why hast thou slain thine only daughter thus?
Not I. It was Chiron and Demetrius. They
For the Frenchman.
Why'd I know you were going to say that?
The Frenchman does not forget, and he does not forgive.
You know him?
I know only what I need to know. I know that if you want to take something from our world into your world that does not belong there, you must go to the Frenchman.
Is that what you're doing here?
Rama, please.
I do not want to be cruel, Kamala.
Devaki will kill you.
On hearing this, Kamsa burst into a rage.
I'll slay her before she lives to have the 8th child.
Kamsa, do you realize what you're going to do? It is not justice to kill your sister on the day of our marriage. If you spare Devaki's life, I promise you that I shall hand over every child born to us. Please trust me.
I'll spare Devaki, but I'll make sure that you keep your...
Today's episode was brought to you by Skillshare. What is going on, everybody? My name is John Solo, and welcome to in the Ocean. After assuming power, Kronos learned from his mother Gaia he's fair, meaning he never breaks a deal once it's made, even if he ends up on the losing end of it, which he often does. As a fan of the movie, I can appreciate the design of Hades' character, both in appearance and personality. He's actually one of my favorite movie villains ever, but as you're about to see, he's almost nothing like his mythological counterpart, except that maybe they both sound like James Woods. There's really no way of knowing. Many people are familiar with the Greek gods, but not many know the specifics of where they came from, and there's no way we can explain Hades' messed up origins without touching on his very messed up birth, because that's right, Hades had parents. Before the Olympian gods rose to power, there lived 2 generations of divine beings, the primordial deities and the Titans. Hades was the 4th child and first son of the Titans Kronos and Rhea, who were essentially the king and queen of the universe. Kronos took that title after overthrowing his father, the previous king Uranus, which he did by castrating him and throwing his balls in the ocean. After assuming power, Kronos learned from his mother Gaia, the earth deity, and his father, who he somehow remained on speaking terms with, that he would one day suffer the same fate, and his children would overthrow him. Kronos loved his newfound power and his balls, so to prevent this prophecy from happening, he literally ate his first 5 children. This video is brought to you by Privacy.com. Stay until the end to see how Privacy.com lets you make purchases online without risking any of your personal experience for everyone. As for her portrayal, that depends on the culture. Aphrodite was often shown as a beautiful woman with ideal measurements who was either nude or mostly nude. What's interesting though is that version of her was more common in Roman mythology before finding its way to the Greeks. Originally in Greek cities like Sparta, Aphrodite was covered in armor from head to toe, kind of resembling Athena. This led to her being affiliated with Ares, the god of war. I've got a story about those two I think you're really going to like, by the way, but that's coming later. Like many Greek gods, Aphrodite was worshipped and sacrificed to on a regular basis, but her main festival, called Aphrodisia, was celebrated once a year during the summer across all of Greece. And I just figured out why it's called an aphrodisiac. On such occasions, priests would purify the temple of Aphrodite Pandemos with the blood of a sacrificial dove, a bird often associated with the goddess. Next, the altars would be lathered in special oils and perfume. 5 children: Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Yeah, I said Hera's name right this time. Can you believe it? 100 people who commented the same correction in the last video? I'm obviously not as smart as you guys, but I somehow pulled it off. Cue those same people commenting, "Nice try." Raised in secret. Meanwhile, instead of a baby, she gave Kronos a rock wrapped in cloth, knowing that he'd just devour it immediately without close inspection. And that is exactly what happened. Years passed by, and all the while Zeus was being raised by the nymphs in Crete, his father had no idea. When the young god finally reached adulthood, he learned his true identity as well as what happened to his brothers and sisters, and was determined to free them. Depending on the version, Zeus was given an emetic, medicine that makes you puke, by either his mother Rhea or the Titan Oceanus, and he tricked Kronos into drinking it, causing him to throw up his children.
To be easy. However, historians did know the names of Sally Hemings' children from their birth records, so they had a starting point in tracing the genetic lineage and solving the mystery of the Jefferson-Hemings controversy. Today, historians strongly believe Thomas Jefferson indeed fathered Sally Hemings' children. Out of the 4 surviving children, 2 boys and 2 girls, historians were only able to track down 2, Easton Hemings and Harriet Hemings. The 5th child died at an early age. Easton Hemings was freed upon the
the nymphs in Crete, his father had no idea. When the young god finally reached adulthood, he learned his true identity as well as what happened to his brothers and sisters, and was determined to free them. Depending on the version, Zeus was given an emetic, medicine that makes you puke, by either his mother Rhea or the Titan Oceanus, and he tricked Kronos into drinking it, causing him to throw up his children in the reverse order he ate them. It was at this point Zeus declared himself the master of the universe, but Kronos wasn't just going to step aside and let him have it.
Late Bronze Age settlement. This had stood at the time the Trojan War was supposed to have taken place. But Layer 6 was nothing like the city described in Homer's epic. The excavation centered foremost on layer number 6, the 3,000-year-old Late Bronze Age settlement.
But they're always worth seeking out. Encounter numerous points of interest in her travels. Many of these landmarks and locations have been... Frey will encounter numerous points of interest in her travels. Many of these landmarks and locations have been corrupted.
The word samsara does not mean family. It just means cyclical. Who you are right now is a product of certain cycles.
Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Mythology Explained. In today's video, Hades went through all the trouble. He was Zeus's brother, one of the original 6 Olympians, the lord of the underworld. Did he really need to resort to kidnapping to get himself a wife? Surely there must have been a long line of women just waiting for the Dark Lord to drag them down to hell. It's these questions that we're going to unpack in the rest of this video. Hades wasn't much of a philanderer. He bedded few women and he sired few children. This is in stark contrast to the sexual exploits of his lecherous brothers. Poseidon and Zeus were, presumably, desired by many, but they...
I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on this one. To fix without the giants ever discovering their collusion, so he used his magic to take the form of a beautiful young mare. Yes, it was Loki who distracted Svaltofari, but I'm willing to bet that banging him was not part of the original plan, even though that's what happened. I can totally imagine Loki in his horse form realizing after 10 or so hours.
A few more things I need to mention before we dive in. Firstly, this video will contain spoilers. I don't think we can consider any of the mythology itself as a spoiler really, but Hades has an exceptional narrative that is
9. It was at that age American Army brat made her first acquaintance with death at the age of 9. It was at that age she witnessed the death of her parents at the hands of Japan's most ruthless Yakuza boss, Matsumoto.
Matsumoto, 私を見て。
She rarely goes out in public. When she does, her feet must not touch the ground, in order to preserve her godliness.
He may never see another face for the rest of his life.
I'm sorry. You don't have to answer that question.
No, I don't mind. The answer is simple. I love my daughter very much. I find her to be the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. But where we are from, that is not enough. Every program that is created must have a purpose. If it does not, it is deleted. I went to the Frenchman to save my daughter. You do not understand.
They ravished her and cut away her tongue, and it was they that did her all this wrong.
Confess them to us hither presently. Why, there they are! Both baked in that pie whereon their mother daintily hath fed, eating the flesh that she herself hath bred. 'Tis true, 'tis true! Witness my knife sharp bite!
To be easy. However, historians did know the names of Sally Hemings' children from their birth records, so they had a starting point in tracing the genetic lineage and solving the mystery of the Jefferson-Hemings controversy. Today, historians strongly believe Thomas Jefferson indeed fathered Sally Hemings' children. Out of the 4 surviving children, 2 boys and 2 girls, historians were only able to track down 2, Easton Hemings and Harriet Hemings. The 5th child died at an early age. Easton Hemings was freed upon the death of Jefferson, as he had not yet come of age before his death. Being fair in skin tone, he was able to integrate and pass as a white person in society. He married and had 3 kids of his own as a free man. However, his resemblance to Jefferson didn't go unnoticed. Easton's arrival in Ohio, where he went after he left the plantation, was one of intrigue. KPBS published an article which appeared in the Scioto Gazette, an Ohio newspaper describing Easton Hemings as light bronze color, little over 6 feet tall, and dignified. His nearly straight hair showed a hint of auburn, and his face indistinct suggestion of freckles. Rumors spread that he was the son of Thomas Jefferson. One reporter decided to make it his issue, and he wanted to hear what the mysterious man in town had to say about the prospect of being the son of a former president. Easton was regarded as a gentleman, as many people within the small town thought he was an all-around good guy. When the journalist managed to meet Easton face to face, he asked if the rumors of his lineage were true. Easton's response silenced the reporter. Easton responded,
"Do you know what happens when you put rosemary leaves in a jar of alcohol? Studies show that
13 days after my sister disappeared, my father received a shocking phone call.
Pronto? Lei ascolti bene, abbiamo pochi momenti. Questa essere della sua figliola. Pronto?
Birth rates within the country among those that the Nazis wanted breeding. Enter head of the SS, Heinrich Himmler, who, besides being one of the principal architects of the Holocaust, in his spare time came up with the idea of encouraging young women to be used as breeding stock for his
This would be difficult to do with a normal person. It was much easier once their limbs were broken. The wheel was then attached to a pole and displayed for all to see, much like those who had undergone crucifixion. At this point, some would be cut apart or strangled, which would finally, though painfully, end their suffering.
The nymphs in Crete, his father had no idea. When the young god finally reached adulthood, he learned his true identity as well as what happened to his brothers and sisters, and was determined to free them. Depending on the version, Zeus was given an emetic, medicine that makes you puke, by either his mother Rhea or the Titan Oceanus, and he tricked Kronos into drinking it, causing him to throw up his children in the reverse order he ate them. It was at this point Zeus declared himself the master of the universe, but Kronos wasn't just going to step aside and let him have it. An epic war between the gods and titans broke out and lasted for 10 years without either side securing the W. That is, until Zeus traveled to the domain of Tartarus, where the monsters Kronos had imprisoned resided. Zeus released the 100-armed Hecatoncheires and Cyclops, who, as a token of appreciation, gave him thunder and lightning bolts to use as weapons. Hey guys, before this video starts, I just want to announce that Sol Plenteria, meaning Feast of the Bath, where her priestesses would conduct a cleansing ritual on her statue by washing its clothes, body, and any of her sacred symbols like the owl or snake. This festival celebrated Athena Polias, which roughly translates to of the city. As you might expect, this version of her was thought to protect cities. However, when honoring her athletic talents during an Olympic-style festival, she was known as Athena Promachos, meaning she who fights in front, and during the festival for bronze workers, she was given the epithet Athena Ergain, meaning industrious. She actually has way more nicknames than just those two, but I'm not going to bother trying to pronounce them all, so here they are if you want to give it a shot. Anyway, that about does it for all the basics when it comes to Athena, so now I think it's time we dive into the stories about her, and trust me when I say there are some fucking crazy ones, so you're not going to want to miss this. Now, it's only natural that we start this section at the beginning of Athena's life, which, as I mentioned earlier, wasn't exactly traditional. So before Zeus married Hera, he had many other relationships, and one of those was with Metis, a Titaness who was regarded as wiser than all gods and men. Zeus was afraid that Metis would one day give birth to a powerful son that was capable of overthrowing him and taking his throne, similar to how he overthrew his own father Kronos and how Kronos overthrew Uranus. So he put a plan into action to prevent that from happening. Learning from his father's mistakes, Zeus didn't just swallow the powerful child after it was born and trap it in his stomach. Instead, he tricked Metis into letting him swallow her. I know, that sounds like a foolproof plan, but what he didn't realize is that Metis was already pregnant. Now we fast forward just a few wives later to just after Zeus and Hera say their I do's, and the king of the gods starts complaining about a terrible headache. The pain continues to get worse and worse until Zeus finds it unbearable, and in desperation he orders one of the other gods to hit him in the head with a Minoan axe. A migraine treatment I think we've all tried at least once. When the axe makes contact with Zeus's forehead, it splits open and out leaps Athena, fully grown, fully armored with her iconic helmet and spear, and screaming a battle cry so powerful that she even terrified the earth and sky. And perfumes, then the statues of Aphrodite and Pytho, the goddess of persuasion and seduction, would be brought somewhere in the temple to be ritually bathed. I've got to imagine those statues would be heavy too. It says something about the dedication the Greeks had to their worship that they would put that much effort in just to give the gods' statues a bath. But anyway, now that you
Som triatlet kan hverdagen være hektisk.
He then ordered the procession to return to Mathura. When they reached Mathura, Kamsa imprisoned Devaki, Vasudev in the dungeons.
He may never see another face for the rest of his life.
I'm sorry. You don't have to answer that question.
No, I don't mind. The answer is simple. I love my daughter very much. I find her to be the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. But where we are from, that is not enough. Every program that is created must have a purpose.
They ravished her and cut away her tongue. And it was they that did her all this wrong.
Confess them to us hither presently. Why, there they are! Both baked in that pie whereon their mother daintily hath fed, eating the flesh that she herself hath bred. 'Tis true, what the...
He may never see another face for the rest of his life. No, it is a word. What matters is the connection the word implies.
And perfumes, then the statues of Aphrodite and Pytho, the goddess of persuasion and seduction, out of the sea foam that gathered around Uranus's dismembered members. By the time she showed up on Mount Olympus, Zeus and the Olympians had already taken over, and to no surprise, when those Olympians saw the beautiful Aphrodite, they all wanted her to themselves. In order to stop any conflict from breaking out between the gods, Zeus immediately the nymphs in Crete. His father had no idea. When the young god finally reached adulthood, he learned his true identity as well as what happened to his brothers and sisters, and was determined to free them. Depending on the version, Zeus was given an emetic, medicine that makes you puke, by either his mother Rhea or the Titan Oceanus, and he tricked Kronos into drinking it, causing him to throw up his children in the reverse order he ate them. It was at this point Zeus declared himself the master of the universe, but Kronos wasn't just going to step aside and let him have it. An epic war between the gods and titans broke out and lasted for 10 years without either side securing the W. That is, until Zeus traveled to the domain of Tartarus, where the monsters Kronos had imprisoned resided. Zeus released the 100-armed Hecatoncheires and Cyclops, who, as a token of appreciation, gave him thunder and lightning bolts to use as weapons. With their help, the Olympians were successful in overthrowing the Titans and banished everyone that opposed them to Tartarus. When it came time to divvy up Kronos' old territory, the three brothers drew straws. Zeus was given the air and sky, Poseidon the ocean, and Hades the underworld. The ancient earth deity Gaia could not be claimed because she was a strong, independent woman. So that is how the Olympian gods we know and fear started their reign. You may have noticed how similar it was to Hades' uprising in the movie, with the nod to Tartarus, the freeing of the Titans, the march on Mount Olympus, and specifically.
Hvem er du uden dit netværk? Dine forbindelser nær og fjern. De er på, når du
One day, Kamsa was sitting in his chamber. When he got the news that Devaki had given birth to a child. Kamsa immediately went to the prison.
Devaki, give me the baby.
Kamsa snatched the child from Devaki and caught hold of its legs. Then he dashed it on the ground, killing it at that very moment. After that,
Moses? What is Pharaoh's answer? Surely he will see sense now.
No. He refuses.
Again?
Give up, Moses, before it's too late. God will keep on doing this until Pharaoh breaks.
Anubis, dog-headed god of the dead, thy clawed hands drip blood red, taking souls to the weighing scale, watching closely as some win, some fail. Those that are light, to paradise they proceed, but those that are heavy, to Amit you feed. The feather of my heart is too light to defy what is in the soul and to justify. So from that day forth your claws were blood red, for every human soul you sever from the mummied dead. Anubis, hear my plea, I beseech thee. My soul is pure, and will weigh lightly. Tarnish it not with your claws of red, but place it with care in the place of the heavenly dead. Anubis is perhaps one of the most recognizable gods in the Egyptian pantheon. Often we associate him today with the afterlife and as the god of mummification. The ancient Egyptians first referred to him as Inpu or Anpu, the word Inpu closely relating to imp, meaning decay. It wasn't until the arrival of the ancient Greeks that he began to be known as Anubis. The iconic appearance of the god is what makes
the nymphs in Crete, his father had no idea. When the young god finally reached adulthood, he learned his true identity as well as what happened to his brothers and sisters, and was determined to free them.
God is what makes him so easy to identify. He was often depicted as a man with the head of a jackal, and other times he was seen as a regular jackal or dog that would accompany the goddess Isis. In more recent artwork, these two depictions seem to have been somewhat merged together, giving us a more menacing and mysterious looking god, one that we'd almost expect as a guardian of the underworld. The association between Anubis and the jackal is one that was formed because it was pretty common for Egyptian jackals to lurk around tombs and graves. Perhaps one of the main reasons that tombs became so intricate and elaborate was to keep the bodies of the dead safe from jackals and other animals. The host of genetic research that's been done over the years would suggest that the Egyptian jackal associated with Anubis is in fact not a jackal at all, but rather an ancient wolf. Anubis's fur or skin was depicted as black, and jackals typically have brown fur. The colour black was thought to be a symbol of death, but it was also a symbol of fertility, thought to represent the River Nile's fertile black soil. The first ever mentions of Anubis can be found in the ancient pyramid texts, as well as in some of the ancient tombs of the Old Kingdom, where he was seen as the guardian and protector of the dead. After all, it was Anubis who was originally considered to be the god of the underworld. Only later he then became associated with the embalming process and mummification.
This episode is sponsored by Magic Spoon Cereal. Icelandic poet Snorri Sturluson around 1200 AD, and the Poetic Edda, a collection of anonymously composed Old Norse poems that were passed on orally for centuries before eventually being collected. Both books make passing mention of either Hel or her kingdom several times, but the best place to start this breakdown is definitely the first part of the prose Edda, Wastes of Niflheim, and gives her the job of ruling over the souls of the dead who don't go to Valhalla, specifically those who die from sickness or old age.
God is what makes him so easy to identify. He was often depicted as a man with the head of a jackal, and other times he was seen as a regular jackal or dog that would accompany the goddess Isis. In more recent artwork, these two depictions seem to have been somewhat merged together, giving us a more menacing and mysterious looking god, one that we'd almost expect as a guardian of the underworld. The association between Anubis and the jackal is one that was formed because it was pretty common for Egyptian jackals to lurk around tombs and graves. Perhaps one of the main reasons that tombs became so intricate and elaborate was to keep the bodies of the dead safe, as well as in some of the ancient tombs of the Old Kingdom, where he was seen as the guardian and protector of the dead. After all, it was Anubis who was originally considered to be the god of the underworld, only later he then became associated with the embalming process and mummification. When all of the body parts of Osiris had been collected, the responsibility of mummification fell to Anubis, a process that had not been seen before, and one that would provide a model for all subsequent mummifications to follow. It was believed that when Osiris's body was embalmed, and the funeral rites were ready to be performed, his brother Set once again attempted to attack him, this time taking the form of a leopard. Anubis was able to stop the god, branding him in his leopard form with a hot iron rod, and then flaying his skin, wearing the leopard coat as a warning against anyone who would dare to defile the bodies of the dead, and attempted to attack him, this time taking the form of a leopard. Anubis was able to stop the god, branding him in his leopard form with a hot iron rod, and then flaying his skin, wearing the leopard coat as a warning against anyone who would dare to defile the bodies of the dead. It became pretty common.
Few civilizations glorified the dead like the ancient Egyptians. Kings were buried inside giant stone pyramids. Myths were told to be honest and good. The Lord of the Underworld welcomed the pure of heart into the field of reeds. There, the souls of the pure would live and prosper for the rest of time.
After that, Kamsa killed the next 5 children in the similar manner. In due course of time, Devaki was pregnant for the 7th time. The 7th child was miraculously carried to Rohini, another wife of Vasudev, who lived in Gokul. Later, this child was known as Balram.
My lord, the 7th child was stillborn.
Today's episode was brought to you by Skillshare. What is going on? To be rich because his domain was believed to be under the earth, the same place their precious minerals and crops came from, so they thought he played a part in doling them out. Oh, and Hades' domain, the underworld, was also called Hades sometimes. Just thought I'd throw that out there. Like most gods, sacrifices were made to Hades to give thanks, and maybe more importantly, stay on his good side. They often sacrificed darker colored animals.
God is what makes him so easy to identify. He was often depicted as a man with the head of a jackal, and other times he was seen as a regular jackal or dog that would accompany the goddess Isis. In more recent artwork, these two depictions seem to have been somewhat merged together, giving us a more menacing and mysterious looking god. Yet, interestingly enough, the story of Anubis branding Set while he was a leopard is a story that is used to explain how leopards got their spots. When Osiris did eventually pass into the underworld, out of respect for the god, Anubis stepped down, making Osiris the new ruler. Anubis, however, did maintain a crucial role, helping guide souls through to the afterlife. When a new soul would arrive in the underworld, Anubis would escort them to the Hall of Two Truths, where they would have their heart weighed against a feather. The feather was thought to represent Mahat, the goddess of balance and order. The weighing process was overseen by Anubis, and the ceremony was performed in front of Osiris and the judges of the underworld.
After that, Kamsa killed the next 5 children in the similar manner. In due course of time, Devaki was pregnant for the 7th time. The 7th child was miraculously carried to Rohini, another wife of Vasudev, who lived in Gokul. Later, this child was known as Balram.
My lord, the 7th child was stillborn.
Taken birth as your child. Vasudev, take this child away from here to Gokul and switch him with the one born to Nanda Gopal.
You lost control.
That thing was trying to kill us. It's not like you don't get angry in a fight.
Anger can be a weapon. If you control it, use it.
This video is sponsored by NordVPN. So if we were talking Greek gods right now, I'd be starting this off with a breakdown of what Balder was the god of, what his sacred symbols were, how people worshipped him, all those basic details. But the Norse gods functioned in a very different way than the Greek gods did. Or any other gods for that matter. Instead of presiding over a single domain and having a personality that reflected that, each of the gods was a complicated, multifaceted being who may have been associated with particular qualities, but didn't necessarily have sole dominion over them. They acted just like people, each with their own unique interests, strengths, and weaknesses, only because of their elevated status, many of their personality traits were magnified. Basically take the best things about you and the worst things about you, now crank them both up to 10. That's how you'd be as a Norse god. And what's fascinating is that while they certainly appreciated sacrifices and celebrations being conducted in their honor, they didn't necessarily require their followers to worship them in that particular way. If you wanted to declare Odin your patron god and join a cult dedicated to praising him, you could, but all you really had to do was live your life with a recognition and appreciation for the roles they played in shaping the world and the events that happen on it. Anyway, when it comes to Balder, according to our primary resources for Norse mythology, the Prose Edda by Snorri Sturluson and the Poetic Edda, he was a pretty special guy. If you've seen my episode about the Norse creation story, then you might remember the way the Prose Edda breaks down the Norse mythos is through a dialogue between Gangleri, who is King Gylfi in disguise, and Odin, who disguised himself as three kings named High, Just as High, and Third. Gangleri asks them about the creation of the world, about the Aesir gods, all that stuff, and it's from them that we learn about Balder. They describe him as the second son of Odin by Frigg. They say he's the best of the Aesir and all things praise him. He was so beautiful and fair that he literally glowed, and he was so wise that when he made a judgment, no one disagreed with it. We also know that his wife is the goddess Nanna. Although she only appears in the myth about his death, like her husband, she's associated with love, joy, and peace. Together, they had a son named Forseti. He took after his role model parents and is considered the god of justice and reconciliation. Now, while there aren't any records about how Balder's most dedicated followers worshipped him, there is a 1300s book called Frithiof's Saga, which takes place in the 8th century and mentions both a cult and temple that were established in his honor. We do have to take this with a massive grain of salt, though.
God is what makes him so easy to identify. He was often depicted as a man with the head of a jackal, and other times he was seen. Anubis would escort them to the Hall of Two Truths, where they would have their heart weighed against a feather. The feather was thought to represent Mahat, the goddess of balance and order. The weighing process was overseen by Anubis, and the ceremony was performed in front of Osiris and the judges of the underworld. The demon known as Amit waited by Anubis' side. If the heart weighed heavier than the feather, they would not be granted passage to the afterlife. They would be given one last chance to convince Osiris and his judges that they lived a fair and balanced life. If they were unable to do this, then they would be devoured by Amit and cursed to suffer a second death. This entire ceremony led many to refer to Anubis as the guardian of the scales. Like many of the other gods in Egyptian mythology, Anubis' parents were quite an ambiguous topic. In some accounts it was believed to be Ra and his wife Hathor, and in later myths he was believed to be the son of either Osiris or Set. There are even links with Bastet as a potential mother, because of her association with perfumed oils, similar to those that would be used.
Som trætløb kan hverdagen være hektisk.
After that, Kamsa killed the next 5 children in the similar manner. Instantly, Lord Vishnu appeared before them and said,
Devaki Vasudeva, your wish has been fulfilled, and I have taken birth as your child. Vasudeva, take this child away from here to Gokul, and switch him with the one born to Nanda Gopal.
Saying so, Lord Vishnu disappeared. At the stroke of midnight, a baby boy was born to Devaki.
Look, the chains have fallen off. It's a miracle. Devaki, quick, give me the child I will take him to our friend Nanda in Gokul.
As Vasudev turned to go, the door of the prison swung open and he found all the soldiers in deep sleep. Carefully holding the basket on his head, Vasudev.
Today's episode was brought to you by Skillshare. Of his domain were guarded by his three-headed dog Cerberus, who would allow anyone to enter but prevent anyone from leaving. I couldn't find anything about how the real Hades obtained Cerberus, but in the Hercules animated series, it's revealed he got him as a present for his minions Pain and Panic, who kept saying they wanted a dog, then left him with the responsibility of taking care of it. Probably
God is what makes him so easy to identify. He was often depicted. A ceremony led many to refer to Anubis as the guardian of the scales. Like many of the other gods in Egyptian mythology, Anubis' parents were quite an ambiguous topic. In some accounts it was believed to be Ra, and he's
the earth and sky. Just when you thought mythology couldn't get any weirder. But don't worry, there's more to come. The young Athena went on to be raised by Triton, a low-level sea god whom Ariel's father was named after. Triton had a daughter of his own, Pallas, and he raised both girls in a militaristic style, so as you would expect, sometimes things got competitive between them. One day during sparring practice, things got a little carried away, and Pallas was about to strike Athena for real when Zeus intervened and distracted her, allowing Athena to deliver a killing blow. Now to be clear, this was not Athena's intention, and she felt horrible about killing her best friend, so to honor her, she attached her name to her own and called herself Pallas Athena. This was another epithet the warrior goddess commonly went by, and it means young woman, though it's believed this myth was actually invented by the Greeks as a way to explain that nickname after its meaning had been forgotten. I know, the timeline of mythology is stupid confusing, but we're going to shed some light on why that is at the end of this section.
Constantine's goal? Was he trying to change Jesus? Or was he trying to replace him? To answer this question, Simca now looks into the plans Constantine made for his own funeral.
Well, he was actually buried in Constantinople in the Church of the Holy Apostles, which no longer exists. It was reported that he was buried with the 12 apostles surrounding him.
So Constantine prepares his burial by creating a real coffin for himself.
Right.
And then these pretend coffins for the other disciples.
Right.
If you take Jesus' place, one way to interpret it is that I am Jesus.
Well, you could see it that way. On earth, the Roman emperors do become the stand-in for Jesus, because now with the Christian Roman Empire, the emperor takes on the role as being the leader of the worldwide Christian community.
But by taking Jesus' place, did Constantine see himself as someone who could promote Jesus' message or subvert it?
Or literally means without fear of pollution, without fear of taboo. And so it's time for me to put aside any fear I may have of germs and disease, and to simply accept this experience for what it is.
Wait to start. You must stop.
she?
Imprisoned in a body. Bethany figured it all out. She's a clever girl, that one. Oh. Hang on a minute.
They drop. See, most of our best work is done when they're asleep. We can monitor and direct their subconscious.
We're not telling people what to think. We're just trying to show them how.
She's dreaming. Nightmare? Off the charts. Scary monsters. Let's amp it up, Delcia may drop.
YouTube Music Premium er en oplevelse, der lader dig bestemme over din musik, så du kan lytte uden reklame.
My frank analysis, think of it as personality dialysis. Now that I've chosen to become a policist or an advisor, there's nobody wiser, not when it comes to popular. I know about.
What a lovely little bride, I'll make my dear all look divine.
Influenced early Judaism, and, by extension, all of the Abrahamic religions. It would mean that the group of religions that account for more than half of the modern world's religious population was also influenced by it. And on Akhenaten, an 18th dynasty pharaoh who ruled in the 14th century BCE. This theory presents Akhenaten as the founder of monotheism, and thus as potentially a profound influence on nascent Judaism, which, according to the Old Testament, burgeoned around the same time. Though Judaism is a relatively small religion today, there are only about 14 million devotees. Both Christianity and Islam, which combine for about 4 billion devotees worldwide.
Curious, Hecate went to investigate, but in the end found nothing. 9 days later, a saddened Demeter came close to Hecate's cave and yelled out for her daughter Persephone. Being one of the most famous deities of all magic and witchcraft, Hecate was the goddess of crossroads, boundaries, ghosts, the moon, necromancy, witchcraft, and magic in Greek mythology. She was usually depicted as a beautiful goddess holding a pair of torches, a key, or some snakes. She was also known as the triple form goddess and was depicted as such, with either 2 faces growing out of each side of her head or even full bodies connected to her sides. She was also usually accompanied by dogs, which was one of her sacred animals. In mythology, Hecate was the only child of Perseus, the titan of destruction, and Asteria, the titaness of shooting stars. During the war against the Titans, Hecate fought on the side of the gods and was helpful in their victory. She also battled in the war against the giants and defeated the giant Cletus by lighting him on fire. Many years after the wars, Hecate was in her cave when she suddenly heard a loud scream. Curious, Hecate went to investigate, but in the end found nothing. 9 days later, a saddened Demeter came close to Hecate's cave and yelled out for her daughter Persephone. Realizing that she heard Persephone's scream, Hecate told Demeter what she heard. The two then traveled together to the palace of the Sun Titan Helios. There they asked the all-seeing Sun Titan what had happened to Persephone, and he told them that Hades had kidnapped her to the underworld. Eventually, when Persephone returned from the underworld, upon seeing her, Hecate hugged the young goddess. In return for helping her mother, Persephone invited Hecate to live in the underworld as her minister and companion. After helping Persephone, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades offered her a sliver of their power so that she could be the watcher to the boundaries of their realms, allowing Hecate to know when anyone journeyed into the underworld, the sea, or the high skies. Later on in myth, she would take Hecuba, the queen of Troy, as a servant in the form of a black dog, after the queen tried to kill herself during the fall of Troy. She would also teach magic and potion making to the enchantress Circe and the witch Medea. Number 2. Isis. In Egyptian mythology, many of the gods shared the domain of magic, but one of the most important was Isis, the goddess of motherhood, rebirth, healing, wisdom, women, and magic. In mythology, Isis was a member of the Enneads and the child of the Sky Mother Nut and the Earth Father Geb, alongside her siblings Osiris, Set, Nephthys, and Horus the Elder. After the Sky Mother and Earth Father were separated from each other, Geb passed on his crown to his eldest son Osiris, making him the new king of Egypt.
Age. So that's actually somewhat similar to what happens in the movie. Marvel's Odin banishes her from Asgard because he knows she's going to play a role in its destruction, just like the Odin of the mythos. And that may sound like quite a burden he placed on her, being in charge of almost everyone who dies, but it doesn't appear that Hel had a problem with it. I mean, one half of her was said to be blue, which we know is a color the Norse people associated with bloated, rotting bodies, so she probably was a little more comfortable around the dead anyway. So let's talk about Hel's kingdom for a second. What was it like, and what exactly did she do there? Well, what we know for sure is that Hel had the hookup. She got to live in a great big mansion with high walls and sturdy gates. That hall was called Eliudner, her table was called Famine, her knife Starvation, her threshold the Stumbling Block, and her bed was called Care or Sick Bed. She also had two servants, a man and woman whose names are Ganglati and Ganglot, which both mean sloth or lazy walker. Hel and her servants took care of the dead by assigning them housing, and that's pretty much all we know, actually. I'll be honest with you guys, it's not exactly clear what the Norse people believed about the afterlife, specifically Hel. The place, not the person. I'm gonna call it Helheim just to distinguish between the two, but you should know that it's just called Hel in the mythos. It makes for some confusing poems where we can't be sure whether the place or person is being referred to, but that's Norse mythology for ya. Anyway, the reason it's so hard to nail down exactly what they believed about it is because half our information comes from Snorri, who not only contradicts himself multiple times throughout the Prose Edda, but was also influenced by Christianity and tried to harmonize the two belief systems. For example, in the chapter about Loki's children, we're specifically told that Hel receives those who die of sickness and old age, but an earlier chapter about Odin says that wicked people are sent to Hel and from her go to Niflhel. So to me it sounds like Snorri's going for the best of both worlds here. There's the old and sick who died in ways the Norse people may not have found respectable, and then the wicked who the Christians believed would be punished after.
And his wife Hathor, and in later myths he was believed to be the son of either Osiris or Set. There are even links with Bastet as a potential mother because of her association with perfumed oils, similar to those that would be used during the embalming process. Anubis' wife, Anput, was thought to represent the female aspect of Anubis, in name as well as in association, as she was also seen as a goddess of funeral and mummification. Together they had one child, known as Kebeshet, the goddess of purification and cool in water. She was often described as the serpent that purified the pharaoh. Many also associated her with the embalming liquid during the mummification process. It was even believed that while the spirits of the dead waited during the mummification process, Kebeshet provided them with water to help purify their souls. Most of the individuals involved in the embalming and mummification process would worship Anubis by wearing masks that resembled the god during the embalming ritual. It's believed that Anubis possessed a vast anatomical knowledge because of the skills he displayed when embalming bodies. The priests of Anubis were regarded as very skilled healers with a vast knowledge of herbal remedies. The large popularity of Anubis meant that he was worshipped all over Egypt, and his cult center was in Sinopolis, located in Upper Egypt.
Vasudev headed towards Gokul.
Roman emperors do become the stand-in for Jesus, because now with the Christian Roman Empire, the emperor takes on the role as being the leader of the worldwide Christian community.
It was all preserved due to the dampness.
Now this is close to the Roman fort?
Yes, and it was 500 foot soldiers, and Mithras was for the officers. So that's why it's so small.
But instead of bones or Christian symbols, this fort revealed a special temple built by Roman officers that were devoted to the pagan god, Mithras.
Sun god called Mithras. How did Constantine mobilize both these religions to serve his own ends? Can it be that what appealed to him was a blend of Mithraism and Christianity? Did he fuse the two together to create a super religion that would allow him to gain control over the entire Roman world?
Not far from the Roman military fort where Simca has seen evidence of Christian soldiers in Constantine's army, another fort was discovered in 1949 by a French bulldog sniffing for bones. But instead of bones or Christian symbols, this fort revealed a special temple built by Roman officers that were devoted to the pagan god, Mithras.
My father's dog, same breed as this one, a French bulldog, was sniffing around and found the middle altar. As you can see, it's very wet here. It was all preserved due to the dampness.
Now this is close to the Roman fort?
Yes, and it was 500 foot soldiers. And
yes, the bridge becomes a way to refer to not necessarily the battle itself, but the consequences of the battle.
Yet in Eusebius's first draft of this account, he doesn't mention Constantine's vision.
Are you from the Matrix?
Yes. No. I mean, I was.
Why did you leave?
I had to.
Vasudev headed towards Gokul.
God of Abraham, take my child into thy hands, that he may live to thy service.
Are you from the Matrix?
Yes. No. I mean, I was.
Why did you leave?
I had to.
I had to leave my home too.
Sati, come here, darling. Leave the poor man in peace.
Yes, Papa.
I am sorry, she is still very curious.
I know you.
Yes, in the restaurant.
Vasudev headed towards Vasudev was followed by Adisesha, the snake that Vishnu reclined on in Vaikuntha. It spread his hood over the child in the basket that Vasudev carried on his head. Soon, Vasudev reached the bank of the river Yamuna. And to his astonishment, the river parted and gave him the way. Reached Gokul, where Nandagopal's wife Yashoda had just given birth to a female child. Vasudev placed Krishna in the baby girl's cradle and took the baby girl gently with him. Vasudev made his way back to the dungeon. As soon as he was back with the baby girl, the dungeon doors closed, waking up the guards. The voice of a baby crying greeted their ears. On hearing the cry of an infant, the gods immediately reported the birth of the child to their king.
Devaki, give me the baby. How can a baby girl do any harm to mighty warrior like you that the whole world fears?
But Kamsa was not ready to listen to any of their pleas. The baby girl slipped out of his hand and rose up in the air. She turned into goddess Durga.
Oh, wicked Kamsa, you have just displayed your valor by trying to kill a helpless baby. Your destroyer was born to Devaki at midnight and is now safe at Gokul. When the time comes, he will come in search of you and punish you for all the evil you have committed.
Care of it. Probably nothing more than a joke and shouldn't even be considered canon, but it's pretty funny regardless. Anyway, this intimidating demeanor Hades had may have been a choice on his part, but it was most necessary in his line of work. After all, he was in charge of the souls of every person who ever died. Consider right now that there's more than 7.5 billion people on this planet and the disaster that would ensue if one person was in charge of keeping everyone in line. Yes, Hades was a god, and yes, he did have some help, but even way back then, way more people had died than are currently living right now. So needless to say, he had his work cut out for him and had to be on his A game at all times. I mean, no belief system on the planet would say a god sucked at what he was the god of, so Hades' character had to reflect that of someone who humans believed could keep billions of souls under control. This meant him being stern, objective, and holding everyone equally responsible for abiding by his laws and punishing those who broke them severely. In other words, he wasn't as much a tyrannical king as he was a stern judge, and I think this trait is reflected in the movie with the deals that he makes and never breaks, even when they don't go his way. While indifferent towards most of his subjects, there was a few rule breakers he had disdain for. There was Sisyphus, a king who found several ways to cheat death and was punished with the eternal task of rolling a massive boulder up a hill, only for it to roll back down when he got close to the top. Asclepius, a demigod who, throughout his lifetime, became a famous and talented physician and eventually learned to bring the dead back to life. Because Hades was feeling cheated out of those nice, juicy souls, he told Zeus to strike the demigod down with a lightning bolt, but after his death, Asclepius was brought to Mount Olympus, where he became the god of medicine, so he didn't really suffer any consequences. And then there was Pirithous, who I talked about in my 12 Labors video while also pronouncing his name wrong. He tried kidnapping Hades' queen Persephone and was brutally punished by being bound to the chair of forgetfulness for the rest of eternity. As you can see, Hades had his hands full with his underworld responsibilities and making sure no one ever escaped. At the end of this section. Since we're back on the subject of names though, I want to take the time to explain whether Athens was named after Athena or vice versa. Lame Blacksmith couldn't help his excitement, and after coming onto Athena, he came onto Athena. If you know what I mean. Naturally, the goddess was disgusted by this, and she wiped his baby juice off her leg and threw it on the ground. But because this is Greek mythology, the ground wasn't just the ground, it was Gaia, the earth deity, and Hephaestus' great-grandma. After coming into contact with his seed, Gaia got pregnant and gave birth to Erichtonius, another half-human, half-serpent, who went on to be raised by Athena and become a legendary ruler of Athens. Now there are many stories we could segue into from here because in addition to being highly respected by the ancient Greeks, and probably as a result of it, Athena was a prominent figure in some of their most famous myths. Namely, she was an aid to their greatest heroes. She helped Odysseus on his journey back to Ithaca, assisted Heracles during his 12 labors, she helped Jason and the Argonauts on their quest for the Golden Fleece, and many, many more. And while she is performing great services for the mortals in these myths, Athena did have a dark side, and it's one that fans of the Medusa story are no doubt aware of. In that myth, Athena punishes Medusa for being raped by Poseidon within her temple when she mistook their coitus for being consensual. Athena was a virgin goddess and thought Medusa's actions desecrated her sacred walls, so instead of listening to the poor girl's explanation, she transformed her into a gorgon. And as sad as that story is, it's not the only time she did something like that. There once was a mortal woman named Arachne who claimed to be so good at weaving, her skills even surpassed Athena's. The warrior goddess heard about this boast, appeared suddenly in front of Arachne, and said, "Are you sure about that?" Arachne said, "Yep," and so they had a weaving contest.
Our first clues lie in some of the earliest Egyptian mythology. Bastet's father was sun god Ra. Arguably one of the most significant Egyptian gods, he had dominion over the sun. He wielded the strength and the dominance of the Eye of Ra, an instrument of power and vengeance. This was a symbol Bastet was commonly associated with before her transformation. Bastet also had a look-alike lioness sister called Sekhmet. Sekhmet was a vicious warrior goddess who was said to have come to Earth on occasion to eradicate the planet of her enemies. The sisters looked virtually identical, but there was some serious differences between Bastet and Sekhmet. Compared to her warrior sister, Bastet was seen as a more passive, benevolent goddess. The fear and aggression Sekhmet inspired began to create a rift between the perception of the two sisters.
His hood over the child in the basket that Vasudev carried on his head. Soon, Vasudev reached the bank of the river Yamuna. And to his astonishment, the river parted and gave him the way.
In the restaurant of the Frenchman. I am Ramakandra. This is my wife Kamala, my daughter Sati. We are most honored to meet you.
Your programs?
Oh, yes. I am the power plant systems manager for recycling operations. My wife is an interactive software programmer. She is...
The ancient Greeks translated this to mean City of the Dog, which ties into Anubis' close association with jackals and dogs. The ancient Greeks drew some interesting parallels between Anubis and the god Hermes. Hermes may have been seen as the messenger of the gods, but he did also play a small role in the underworld, helping guide those to the river Styx and the beginning of their boat journey. They even merged the two gods together, creating a god that would be known as Hermanubis. His role was quite similar to that of Anubis's, and he even took the form of a man with the head of a jackal. The worship of this variation of Anubis was particularly popular during the Roman rule over Egypt. Despite how much of a predominant role Anubis had in Egyptian mythology, he doesn't really feature in many stories, and I guess we can attribute this to the difficulty of his task. Death isn't exactly something that stops, and all of Anubis' time was spent helping the dead. Like many of the other deities associated with death, in Anubis we have a stoic figure who shows complete devotion to his task. Anubis both respects and protects the dead, and he plays an important role in the underworld, and in that role, he remains unbiased and impartial, trusting that fate will determine the outcome of the souls that he escorts.
The state's case against him relies heavily on circumstantial evidence, and a third acquittal is already been predicted.
For thee, my lord, for thee. Power hath descended forth from thy hand. And shepherds we shall be, for thee, my lord, for thee. Power hath descended forth from thy hand. May swiftly carry out thy command. So we shall flow ever forth to thee, and take
For I believe that Lucian is alive and well. Here.
Are you lying to me?
There are many things that I have done against your will, but he is a lichen.
Are you lying to me?
There are many things that I have done against your will, but he is a lichen.
I'm sorry, my dear. But you leave me no choice.
Father, please!
His hood over the child, the basket that Vasudev carried on his head. Out of his hand and rose up in the air. She turned into goddess Durga.
Oh wicked Kamsa, you have just displayed your valor by trying to kill a helpless baby. Your destroyer was born to Devaki at midnight and is now safe at Gokul. When the time comes, he will come in search of you and punish you for all the evil you have committed.
But Mother, we have not even given him a name.
God will give him a name. Follow it, Miriam. Watch it from the reeds. See where the Lord will lead him.
Yes, Mother.
Vind årets bedste mikrobil. Prøv en Hyundai og deltag.
Fros.
Psychomatic, I said! Put them down. Throw them over. Kill the old man! Throw them over! Brothers, huh? Oh, we're gonna have some fun. So which one first, huh? Which one you love more? Huh? This one? Doc! Call the fucking ambulance right now!
You. Where's the old man?
Never. Just hold on, man. Help's on the way. Hang in there.
Boy, it's over. It's okay. Bro, it's day of my life.
Priest. Did they release his name?
No. But I made a few calls. I still have friends in the diocese there. Kinney Father Douglas McKinney. You knew him?
Knew of him. Everybody did. He's a good man. Youth hostels, soup kitchens.
Even made it to the paper sometimes.
Look, boys, I think it's best if you just stay put until we try to figure out what the hell is going on. Are you at least gonna try and talk them out of this? For all we know, it could be somebody just trying to get away with murder here. Aye. Only there's 1,000 easier ways to do that. Trust me. Someone's trying to call them out. You kill a priest in a church and make it look like it was them. Bring them back with a vengeance. Someone thinks it's really clever. Only one problem with this little plan was that it worked.
On the day of my birth, a ghost of a dead man walked the earth. And my mama don't love me none. She hates everything my daddy done.
Popular, and with an assist from me to be who you'll be instead of dreary who you were, well, are. There's nothing that can stop you from becoming popular. La, 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 la. We're gonna make you popular.
What is your will?
Know you these two?
The Emperor's sons, I take them. Chiron and Demetrius.
Fie, Publius, fie, thou art too much deceived. The one is murder, rape is the other's name. And therefore, bind them, gentle Publius. Caius and Valentine, they handle them.
A warrant for me most wretched to perform the like. Die, die, Lavinia, and thy shame with thee.
What hast thou done? Unnatural and unkind.
Killed her, for whom my tears have made me blind.
Unnatural and unkind.
Eating the flesh that she herself hath bred, 'tis true, 'tis